This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
Teens and families are impacted by the incarceration of a family member. It can be a lonely and isolating place. Amy Friedman is an author and found that there was a need to provide a safe and healing space, and so she founded POPS, the club. Students found a space to express themselves artistically, and Amy has compiled these works, words and art pieces, in an annual collection that provides important insights and a great expression for these young students. Amy Friedman, good morning, and thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Good morning, Kate, and thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you. You're doing such important and incredible work in our community and doing this work with the youth, where it's so important to really focus here, because in our youth, that's when we're really getting to be who we are. And if we can support youth, especially those who are struggling, and so many of them are, probably the majority are. But here, when we're talking about youth who come from broken homes, particularly because they have an incarcerated parent, that has multifacets to it, right? Not the least of which is stigmatization. So you're working with these youth, you're doing great artwork, and you have a book that you've published of their work. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to dig in wherever you want me to begin. I agree with you that youth are the answer. And, one of the reasons this work's so important to me is because of what they teach me. So the youth we serve, they're two names of our clubs, which can become a little confusing, but it happened because there was a merger. But the Pathfinder Club, Pathfinder stands for Paving a Trail of Hope. And POPS, the club, POPS stands for Pain of the Prison System. Both clubs, which are scattered around the country, are being managed and operated by the larger organization called the Pathfinder Network. And so what happened was there was this merger, which has left us with these two names. But we support teenagers who have been impacted by incarceration, deportation, and detention. It's not always apparent, but among the kids we serve are kids who themselves have sometimes been arrested and served some time behind bars. Includes people with brothers and sisters, people whose parent or another family member, another loved one has been deported, detained. Obviously, right this moment, it's particularly challenging moment. And so much fear and sorrow and loss and, confusion affects all these young people. And you're absolutely right that the stigma and the shaming that attaches to these experiences, often what happens is that silences people. You get stigmatized for something and you kind of learn to keep your mouth shut. And you kind of learn to hide, and you kind of learn to sort of play pretend. And doing that is burdensome. So where this work all came from for me started 30 years ago. I was a newspaper columnist, and long story, but I met on an assignment and fell in love with and married a man who was in prison. And I raised his two daughters from the time they were quite young. He and I stayed married for 7 years. We divorced, but those daughters of mine remain my beloveds. And I don't let them say how old they are because that would give it away for me. But what happened when I was living with them was, first of all, I learned firsthand how much stigma attaches to loving someone inside. And more importantly, I saw the impact on them, saw and felt it. And I used to joke kind of darkly with them that they were the world's best liars. But lying that way causes physical health problems, mental health problems. It just takes a toll. So many, many, many years after my divorce, I was remarried to a man who was a high school teacher, and he and I just kept talking about how we wished there was some way we could support kids like my daughters. That he knew in his classrooms, every classroom he taught in, didn't matter where the school was, didn't matter who the population was, didn't matter the ethnic makeup, the financial makeup, because there's this awful statistic, which is that in the United States, 1 in 14 children has a parent who is or has been incarcerated. And that's just parents. So we came up with this idea of starting a club. And it started with one, and it's grown, and we are continuing to grow. So that's a mouthful.
That is, but an important mouthful. And thank you for giving us that, pulling back the curtain, if you will, and giving us all that insight. I mean, there's just so much that is there. One of the latest things you said was 1 in 14 youth in this country has someone in their family. And did you say
a parent who is or has been incarcerated?
Right.
So that, that does not include all the other loved ones that have, been impacted. Like siblings is a really big deal. I mean, early on, I remember a young woman whose brother had been arrested when she was just about 9, and he'd gone off to prison. And, he was like her everything. And she'd lost him. And I mean, thankfully, so one of the things we do in the clubs is they're arts-based, and we encourage writing and art making and making music and all the arts, basically. And we at one point encouraged her to write a letter to her brother. She had been out of touch with him since he'd gone away. Purposely, she was mad at him. And we said, well, write a letter that you're not going to send. And she ended up writing basically a dissertation that she did send, and it reconnected them. And I mean, it was just this like beautiful healing experience for their entire family. He's since come home, and there's some happy endings. But one of the reasons we began with kind of focusing on the arts was both my husband and I, now husband, my last one, we're both writers, and we both teach writing. And we've kind of seen over the years the way that writing can be healing, inspiring, life-changing. Mm-hmm. So we decided that we wanted to kind of focus. We started with writing, and then other teaching artists got involved, and we began doing painting and photography and drawing and music and film and photography. And we also decided we wanted to publish a book that was professionally published, that was, really well edited and well designed. And there were 2 reasons for that. The first was how we knew that would be kind of instill pride in the work that, these kids are opening themselves to the world and giving us their voices and their visions. And we wanted them to be rewarded for that and to have something tangible. Mm-hmm. But maybe more importantly, certainly just as importantly, what I know and what I've learned from this experience is how much they have to teach us. And I think people, I think most of us are used to not listening to teenagers, sort of brushing them off. These kids in particular had experiences that we all need to know about, that their perspective, their understanding, their knowledge is invaluable. So we wanted it to be available to readers.
Yes, and here it is. You have this book, Home and Away, Poetry, Stories, and Art. So all of that's included in it. And have you had reaction from some of these young people, these teenagers, about seeing the book? Although what I have is the early advanced copy.
You don't have the final.
I don't.
Sorry. We'll get you one.
But how did they respond to this?
Well, and let me say, Home and Away is a beautiful, beautiful book. It is our 10th. And the reaction is kind of astonishing. I mean, I would say, first of all, one of the things teenagers don't usually do is let you in on how something like this is impacting them. Like you'll see it in their faces, you'll see them kind of take the book and hold it, and maybe a tear falls. And, we also do book launches and we give them opportunities to read and show their art. And you can feel the pride. But since we've been doing this for 12 years now, we have a lot of graduates who stay connected to the organization. And when they get to be about 22, 23, 24, we have some, I think, 30-year-olds now, they are able to articulate what it meant. And again, we hear them talk about how seeing their work in print and seeing people reading it or hearing people respond to it, or seeing somebody look at a piece of art they'd done and putting it on their wall, just changed them. It deepened their self-confidence. It made them understand that what they had to say was important. It just sort of made them begin to grow in ways that they don't think they might have otherwise. The joy when they're young is seeing it, kind of paying attention to the smiles and the envy of the kids who decided not to submit something, going, well, next year I'm going to submit it too. But as they get older, they're really able to articulate the meaning that it's had. And one quick story, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
This was an amazing story. There was a young man many years ago in one of the clubs who had been homeless for quite a long time in his life. And one day he wrote this very short piece, but it was so powerful. And he was invited up in front of the room to share it with his fellow students, and everybody applauded. So he ended up graduating, and about 2 or 3 years after he graduated, he called me one day and he asked if he could meet with me and my husband, that he had a favor to ask of us. And we kind of thought, oh, maybe he needs to borrow money, or maybe he needs help getting a job, or we weren't sure, but we went to meet him. And he was in great shape. He'd gotten himself a job and he had an apartment and he was doing really well. And he had a girlfriend he really liked. And he said, and he told us that after he'd graduated, been homeless again for a time, living in his car. And his car had been broken into and everything was stolen. And I'm waiting for, oh, could I borrow some money to buy a bed? Or, I don't know what I was waiting to hear. And he said, I hate to ask this, but I lost my book. And when I read that piece in front of the class, it was life-changing for me. And I wonder if I could get another copy of the book. Pretty deep, eh?
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Yes.
We gave him one.
Oh, good. Yes. Here, take 2 so you could share with someone.
Yeah.
The arts. There's something it touches deep within us and releases that, and to find that our story, his story, had such an impact on others. And then, of course, that it had its way of rolling back to him and giving him, he has the value within himself, but we need that
Correct.
kind of feedback, right?
Well,
Yes,
no, I think it enhances the value one places in oneself. I mean, I think so often, especially kids, but all of us feel like, oh, maybe we don't matter, or, we might feel some way, but we're all alone in feeling that or thinking that. And so when we let it, put it on a page and let others respond to it, and we get agreement, attention, applause, somebody saying, oh man, you said exactly the way I feel, or something like that, it's healing. And I think it helps us feel like we're not so alone.
Yes. And that's the part of it, isn't it? That we feel, oh, there's no one like me. So, I'm the bad guy here. I'm such an awful person. No one else is like this. And then to find that, no, there are these connections. It just helps us to see, and we perhaps admire these other people and think that, they're doing great things. It helps. Obviously, you've had all these years of experience in doing it, and what an incredible gift that's being shared with these youth. And I would imagine there's word of mouth that goes on that others want to be in this club, participate,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. So it takes a little bit of courage, I think, to walk through the door the first time, particularly for people who have been stigmatized, to sort of go, what? There's a club for people like me, And I mean, I remember years ago, there were a young woman calling me after she graduated from high school saying she used to stand outside the door every week and she couldn't bring herself to go in. And now she wanted to bring it to her college campus, a club. So, but it does take a little bit to walk through that door. The great thing about the club, I think often people think, oh my gosh, it's a club about people who've been impacted by incarceration and detention and deportation, and it sounds so dark. You know, what happens in the room though is joyful. Like there's just laughter and joy and tenderness and kindness, and that kind of spills out the door, and it infects the entire school. I've seen in schools where these clubs have existed for several years, the whole campus begins to know about it and understand it and be more curious and be sympathetic and come in. Often teachers will say, may I come in? I just want to understand this issue better. And, so it does lighten the load, if you will, for all of them, I think.
And it's understandable too, because writing, we talk about journaling as a way of really being able to get out of ourselves the things that are happening. And any of us become really that much more aware of, oh my gosh, that's what I'm feeling, or that's where it came from. So it's so cathartic. And for
Yes.
them to experience the joy makes such sense because they are working through that and doing it at an important time, in these formative years of theirs.
Yes. I had a great experience about a week ago or so on another show. One of the young men who's in a club out of Portland, who's now a senior, and he came to the Pathfinder Club when he was a freshman. And now he's all grown up, right? He's about to graduate. And the interviewer asked him, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but basically to talk a little bit about his writing. And he said, I look back on what I wrote when I was young, and and I see how much I've grown. I thought, wow, it never even occurred to me that that was going to happen too.
Sure.
And he talked about how he's grown as a person and therefore his writing has grown and his mind has grown and his heart has grown. And it was a beautiful thing to hear.
Oh, well, absolutely. And how insightful of him. This
Yeah,
shows, again,
yeah,
that growth that
yeah,
comes with taking the time, having people, having the yourself and the other instructors believe in this individual
yeah,
makes
yeah,
a world of difference.
yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It does. And also I would say the really big thing. So another little story,
Hmm.
the very first club, the very first meeting, the very first person who walked in the room. This is 2013. Young woman who's a 10th grader walks into the room. We always have food. You've got to have food when there's
Yes.
teenagers involved. And this young woman walks in, and in those days it was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And she picks up her sandwich and sits down. Second young woman walks in the room, another 10th grader. They look at each other across the room, shocked. We later learn these two girls had been friends since kindergarten, good friends, like visited each other's houses, knew all kinds of things about each other's boyfriends. What they didn't know was that each of them had a father who was incarcerated and had been since they were since they were really young. And it was the secret, that they weren't supposed to tell. And they had kept it from each other. So that moment, that was actually for me the moment when I said, having not a clue how you start a nonprofit or run a nonprofit, but I looked at my husband and I said, okay, we're going to start a nonprofit and we're going to bring this to every school in America. Thankfully, I'm no longer the executive director. I did that for 9 years. This merger happened. Luckily, the woman who is the executive director of the Pathfinder Network, which manages and operates all these clubs, is named Leticia Longoria Navarro, and she's a genius executive director. And so thankfully now I get to do what I do best, which is work on these books. But that moment with those two girls was astonishing to see. And again and again and again, in a million different ways, in all these clubs, we see the power of these peer relationships and the way that they're able to kind of hold each other up and lift each other up and, power through some of the really challenging moments and be there for each other. So the club design is kind of designed with the intention of creating a world where their peers are really the most important people.
And because, well, that's natural. Our peers really have such an impact on us, especially during those teen years. So to have that kind of acceptance and support and
Right.
to have that honesty, like not having to keep those secrets, what a burden. I'm sure they
Right.
found that was like a ton lifted off them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like also, I remember my daughters used to think they were the only ones in their school. Now, I knew they weren't. And I would tell them they weren't, but who listens to your parents when you're that age, right? Yes. So when they're in this room with all these people who share common experiences, not necessarily the same, but common, yeah, there's deep comfort in that. They're not alone. And they become really caretakers of each other in some amazing ways to see.
What an education and what a gift to have these clubs and the opportunities they present to these youth, because these are lives saved, lives that really live their potential going forward, as you've shared even with the few stories that you have with us, Amy.
Yeah, yeah. There's a million stories. I mean, like one other little brief one, because she's one of my little adopted daughters. Young woman came when she was 13 years old, right off of being arrested in middle school for starting a fight on the playground. This very feisty, fiery, smart, adorable little girl, and but mad, you know. And she is now a multi-published writer. She's a paralegal about to go to law school. She's first family member to graduate from university. She had no idea that she was going to do all that, and she now comes back in as guest speaker and a mentor. And um, yeah, I mean, I can still see her that first day.
Mm.
This little like, oh, I'm gonna beat somebody up kind of energy, and now she's using that all for really great things.
Yes, yes, that's what she was needing when the family is torn apart for whatever reason in that way.
Mhm.
There isn't that support. So the club then is able to take that gift, that energy that she had that was being destructive, to put it in such a really powerful, constructive way, and where she's, oh, that's so amazing. So
Yeah.
these clubs do exist across the country. If they don't exist, teachers reach out to you to start them.
Teachers, I can give you a website where people can find out more about the book and how to find the book and bring it
Yes.
to their local libraries and their school libraries, but also how to find out more about how to start a club. And it's a brand new website. It's called the pathfinderclub.org. And kind of all the news that's fit to print is in there. So I Leticia is the person who is the sort of first contact for if people are interested in learning how to start a club. There's also and she's up there, and her contact information is up on that site. And Victor Trillo is the program director. I think his title is director or manager of the Pathfinder Club and Pops Club's programs. And he can, direct people to the right spot. And I just like on the book, I'm hoping, I want to say too that kids love these books. Middle school and high schoolers and college students love them. They're like candy to them, I think, because they're reading like the truth of their world, right? Teachers have used them in lots of different classrooms for all kinds of different things, history and English and poetry, and this is what a haiku is, um, and trying to get them all over the place in the libraries everywhere. So I, invite your readers to share the gold.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question as to the value that these present, from the stories that you've shared, from what I have read here, and just how kids, these young people with so much life and so many talents, could have so often been lost because they don't have the support to bring them along to use their talents, as that young girl did with all her anger and energy.
Yeah.
We need this structure.
She once said to me, she said, "I'm like a volcano, and volcanoes are powerful and beautiful." Yeah, she is.
Yes, I am sure. And how incredible is that? You can't even express how great that feeling is to know that you have been instrumental in helping even just one person turn their life around and realize their potential. Unbelievable. Or truly believable, because here are the results in just a dozen years.
And how much, I would say too, they affect all the adults that work with them. The teachers, the original model, there are sort of variants of this, but the original model was that each club would have a teacher sponsor, teacher and or teachers. And it meant in the early days that that teacher had to give up a lunch hour to host the club. And I kind of thought, well, there'll have to be one every year, kind of a new one. There are teachers who've been doing this for 12 years solid because they get so much out of the experience of being in these clubs too. So it's pretty, and volunteers are pretty devoted once they begin. So
what an incredible, beautiful story. And let's mention the website once again, because we want people to go there in droves.
Yes, we do. So it's the pathfinderclub.org.
Excellent. And there are loads of information, as well as a way to get the book and share it. Get multiple books. I mean, this is a great time. We're getting up to graduation season.
It's a great graduation gift.
Isn't it, though? Yes, such encouragement. Well, Amy Friedman, this has been just utterly a delight to learn more about the Pathfinder Network, about POPs and the POPs clubs. So thank you for this work, this passionate work that you're doing, and for sharing these insights with us today.
Thank you again for having me, Kate.
Thank you for being here this morning to meet these amazing women and hear their important stories, which I hope will inspire us to find our passion and make that difference in our world. Please check this station's website for the podcasts for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels, and if you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. I hope you have an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.